Introduction. Hey everyone, welcome back. Today, I want to explore one of the most talked about classic movies of all time, The Warriors. Released in 1979, the film was a sensation for its unflinching look at the street gangs that ruled the dark corners of New York City. The film's main plot revolves around a small gang called the Warriors, who are framed by a rival gang for the murder of a major underworld figure. This sets off an all-night chase that sees our heroes traverse miles of dangerous territory, evading police and rival gangs alike, just to reach their hometown of Coney Island. Critics weren't exactly kind to the film when it first hit theaters, but despite that, it became a cult hit among fans who loved its raw, often disturbing depiction of the harsh realities of street life. Let's get started. Number 1. Origins of the Warriors. The Warriors may seem like a stereotypical product of the 1970s, because of its presentation and swagger, but it was actually based on a 1965 novel by American author Sol Yurick. To further complicate things, his novel was itself based on the ancient Greek book Anabasis. There are several differences between the book and the movie. The book is more brutal and further explores themes that the movie does not. The powerful gang leader who dies at the start of the movie is called Cyrus, whereas in the novel he is called Ismail. Also, what signals all the gangs together at the start is Beatles music playing over the radio, because in the novel, set in 1965, the Beatles were at the height of success and were mainstream at the time. The mention of its origins in Sol Yurick's novel and, more distantly, in the ancient Greek text Anabasis is one of the more fascinating aspects of the Warriors. Anabasis, written by the soldier author Xenophon, recounts the journey of Greek mercenaries who must fight their way home through hostile territories after their leader is killed and they find themselves stranded deep behind enemy lines. It's a tale of struggle, perseverance, and cunning, detailing how a small band can outwit or evade larger groups when unified by a shared goal. Yurick's novel took that ancient framework and transposed it to mid-1960s New York, a metropolis teeming with tension, political unrest, and a growing youth counterculture. Then the 1979 movie took that storyline and reframed it in late 1970s urban decay, capturing a fleeting moment in America's largest city, a time when crime rates were high, social services were under strain, and youth subcultures were experimenting with rebellion and fashion in ways that alarmed the mainstream. Although the movie might seem simple on the surface, an overnight chase across the city, Yurick's deeper themes of identity, loyalty, and survival are still present. The idea of bringing together a city's worth of gangs at a single location and forging a truce, only for that vision of unity to be shattered by an act of betrayal, sets an epic tone that parallels the battle cries of ancient times. The novel, being more brutal, underscores how complicated survival can be when every borough, every neighborhood, and every block is a potential minefield for outsiders. It also examines issues of class, race, and social disillusionment, topics that lurk under the surface of the movie, but which the film, in its fast-paced style, doesn't always pause to explore in depth. Still, the seeds are there. The Warriors was never just about fistfights in subway stations or scuffles in graffiti-strewn park bathrooms. It is ultimately about a group's struggle to remain true to their identity and camaraderie in a city that, for them, has become a battlefield. This concern with identity is part of what makes the Warriors so iconic. Each gang in the movie has a memorable look, from face paint to matching vests, reflecting how crucial image and territory are in youth and street cultures. By the time we consider the original novel's emphasis on the Beatles' music as the rallying cry, a detail left out of the film, we can see how cultural and generational signifiers matter in weaving an alternative social tapestry, showing that even lethal street organizations unite around shared passions and mainstream phenomena. In addition, exploring these origins gives us a glimpse into the creative puzzle the filmmakers had to solve. They had to adapt a novel already inspired by an ancient text, then modernize it, and then budget it for a mainstream 1970s audience. It's no wonder that many details shifted, names changed, and new thematic focuses emerged. Still, that lineage is at the heart of the Warriors and arguably adds to its enduring mystique. Number 2. Production. Limbo. Before being converted into a movie, it seemed there was interest to make a theatrical film based on the Warriors, but no one really knew what to do with it. Rights to the novel had been purchased in anticipation of a movie adaptation as early as 1969, when American International Pictures bought the rights, but nothing came of the transaction. Producer Lawrence Gordon then bought the rights to the novel. For those who don't know who Gordon is, he would go on to produce big Hollywood action movies like Die Hard and Predator. He contacted scriptwriter David Shaber to write the theatrical script for The Warriors. The two filmmakers then pitched the idea to Paramount Pictures and assured them that the movie could be made on the cheap, and thus The Warriors was greenlit. Alien producer in 48 hours, director Walter Hill came on board as The Warriors director. The story of The Warriors' adaptation journey is full of fits and starts, mirroring, in a way, the underdog nature of the movie's plot itself. Nobody quite knew how to handle this raw, street-oriented adventure piece. The industry climate of the late 1960s and early 1970s was changing rapidly. Films like Easy Rider and The Graduate had pushed Hollywood to realize that younger audiences were craving something bolder, more daring, and more reflective of the social tumult around them. So when The Warriors was first pitched, it might have been perceived as too niche, or too gritty, or maybe too unorthodox in its depiction of gang culture. Producers probably didn't see an easy path to mass appeal at that time. It is significant that Lawrence Gordon, eventually known for big, explosive blockbusters, became the champion for The Warriors. The story needed someone with a commercial sensibility and a willingness to take risks on edgy content. David Shaber, the scriptwriter, was integral in translating the novel into a workable cinematic blueprint. Together, they promised Paramount Pictures that they could deliver something fresh and gritty without blowing an enormous budget. That promise arguably sealed the deal, especially when they brought in Walter Hill, who was known for his ability to direct lean, tough, character-driven movies that utilized every penny on the screen. Hill was the perfect fit, as his style consistently leaned toward sparse, intense storytelling that highlighted tension and masculinity, traits that lent themselves naturally to a narrative about warring street gangs. What we often overlook is how uncertain such projects can be. Even though in retrospect, The Warriors feels like an almost inevitable cult hit, at the time it was a gamble. Studios were not as open to untested creative visions. The film's circuitous path to production mirrors the sense of rebellious energy that runs throughout the story itself. It's almost as though fate demanded that The Warriors prove its toughness in the business arena just as the characters prove theirs on the streets of New York. In a sense, the film's behind-the-scenes production story becomes another layer of mythos surrounding this rebellious, unapologetic piece of cinema history. Number 3. Casting. The movie's production originally wanted future Who's the Boss? Star Tony Danza to appear in the film as The Warriors' gang member Vermin. However, he proved unavailable at the time, as he was starring in the hit sitcom Taxi and couldn't break from his commitments to the show. Several years later, in 1983, Danza was also considered for the role of Superman when Christopher Reeve was considering not returning, but he eventually missed out on that role, too. Michael Beck was cast as the movie's main lead, Swan, the leader of the Warriors, because director Walter Hill was impressed with his performance in a movie called Mad Men, which he co-starred in with Sigourney Weaver, a part which also won her the role of Ripley in Alien. Thomas G. Waits was cast as Fox, on the account that director Hill saw him as a sort of modern-day James Dean, and even showed him classic James Dean movies such as Rebel Without a Cause. However, the director and actor's friendship supposedly soured during the filming of The Warriors due to clashes, which led to Waits getting fired and his character's sudden and rather anticlimactic death scene. Casting a movie like The Warriors was no small feat. Not only did the filmmakers need actors who could convincingly portray hardened gang members, but they also needed a natural chemistry that would sell the idea of a unified gang on the run. It might surprise people today to learn that Tony Danza was initially considered, given his later fame in family-friendly sitcoms. Yet the interest in Danza actually reflects the kind of stardom he possessed early on. He was known for an everyman charm as well as a certain street-savvy persona, which might have fit in with the scrappy toughness of the Warriors. Michael Beck ultimately landed the lead role of Swan and brought a stoic yet determined aura to the character. His presence has been described as quietly commanding, which set the tone for the rest of the Warriors. Beck's path to the film also shows how interconnected Hollywood can be. That same project, Mad Men, also launched Sigourney Weaver toward her iconic role as Ripley in Alien. Meanwhile, Thomas G. Waits brought another distinctive energy to the character Fox, but personal differences derailed what could have been a more central role. The behind-the-scenes tensions between Waits and Walter Hill highlight the unpredictability of filmmaking, especially on lower-budget productions where time is limited, money is tight, and creative visions can clash. One contentious argument can lead to a drastic rewrite, which is exactly what happened with Fox's abrupt and unceremonious exit from the movie. Interestingly, the synergy among the Warriors cast still feels organic. Even though Waits was let go, and roles and lines may have been shuffled around, the final on-screen band of misfits radiates a palpable chemistry that can't be faked. It's as if the film's frenetic shoot, nighttime schedule, real-life street obstacles, and budget constraints forced the actors to bond in a genuine way, capturing that urgent energy in front of the camera. The uncertain nature of their off-screen experiences parallels the dangerous all-night trek of their characters, blurring the line between performance and reality and lending the movie a rough, authentic edge. Number 4. Comic book chapters. One can remember watching the 2005 director's cut of The Warriors for the first time and being somewhat disappointed with the comic book transitions that take place, where the movie suddenly turns into comic book panels, creating transitions between certain scenes. I personally felt like they stood out like a sore thumb and went against the movie's more realistic tone, especially considering The Warriors didn't feel like a comic book movie, at least not to me. I also felt it clashed with the more grainy late 70s footage. However, it seems that I was wrong, as these comic book transitions were always intended for The Warriors. Despite its depiction of gang violence, director Walter Hill was a fan of comic books and did see The Warriors as a sort of comic book tale, and originally wanted the movie to be divided by comic book chapter sequences. However, the movie's tight budget at the time prevented the sequences from being created, which would have been expensive for 1979. Finally, in the early 2000s, Hill was able to bring his original comic book concept to life. To be fair, comic books are a prominent part of the original novel that The Warriors was based on. So yeah, I'm going to have to call myself out on that one and say that I was wrong. Number 5, rival gang movie. Apparently, behind the scenes, there was something of a rush to get The Warriors out by a certain time so it could be released before a similar gang movie called The Wanderers. Rival movies aren't an uncommon phenomenon when it comes to cinema, where two movies get released quite close to each other and happen to be very similar. Heck, it happened in 1960 with Psycho and Peeping Tom, and more recently with Batman vs. Superman and Civil War. I often find that people talk about The Warriors but then go on to call it The Wanderers, and vice versa. But here's the thing, the two are actually not very similar, as The Warriors is a contemporary movie set in the time it was made, whereas The Wanderers is a throwback to the greaser trend of the late 50s and early 60s. Both movies, though, do show rival gangs fighting and don't shy away from being gritty. The Wanderers was released on July 13, 1979, and made $23 million. The Warriors was released on February 9, 1979, and made $22.5 million. So it was a very close competition. Number 6, filming locations. The Warriors was filmed on the streets of New York City in neighborhoods such as the Bronx. As the movie was set at night, filming took place between sundown and sunrise. While filming, there were several close encounters with dangers that the crew had to face, such as bricks being thrown at them, a double homicide that temporarily prevented filming, and even real-life gang members trying to fight the cast. Thankfully, the crew had security, so things never got too out of control. Despite going over schedule and budget, the shoot was successfully completed. Number 7, a change of romance. Apart from being a gang and survival movie, The Warriors is also something of a romance, as we see an intense love affair bloom between the Swan character and former rival gang member Mercy, played by Deborah Van Valkenburgh. I always felt that the affair gives The Warriors an appropriate lustful feel, as the chemistry between the two actors is pretty intense. Interestingly enough, the romance in the movie was originally supposed to take place between Mercy and the Fox character. However, it became apparent on the set that actors Michael Beck and Van Valkenburgh just had that certain spark. Also, Fox actor Thomas G. Waits was fired, as mentioned, so the script was rewritten to show the Swan character having the love affair with Mercy instead. In a film so steeped in violence and aggression, the sudden appearance of romance can be a potent narrative twist, offering a glimpse of something more vulnerable, human, and even hopeful. The pairing of Swan and Mercy provides a counterpoint to the hardened survival instincts that define the rest of the warrior's journey. Their chemistry sizzles in the midst of chaos, forging an intense emotional bond that reminds the audience that even in a city ridden with violence, there's room for desire, compassion, and a tenuous form of trust. The shifting of the romance from fox to swan is one of those on-the-fly changes that can happen in filmmaking. No matter how precisely the screenplay is written, the living, breathing dynamic of real actors can dictate a story's direction. Beck and Van Valkenburgh's natural spark made it clear to the filmmakers that the story would resonate more powerfully if the two of them fell for each other. Meanwhile, Thomas G. Waits's departure not only opened the door for that rewrite but also reinforced the feeling that no one in the Warriors is safe, an uncertainty that adds another layer of tension to the film. On a broader level, the romance also underscores the film's thematic exploration of alliances and reconciliation. Mercy initially belongs to a rival gang, yet she and Swan are drawn together by a mutual desire for survival, fueled by something more personal and passionate. It's a small reminder that outside the rigid boundaries of turf wars, individuals can find genuine human connection, complicated though it may be. Even if it's a bit improbable that two people from opposing factions could become so enthralled with each other in the heat of a single night, that improbable spark is exactly the stuff of cinematic magic, and it helps the Warriors carve out a place for tenderness amidst the grit. Number 8, the famous "come out and play" scene was going to be different for me. I'll always remember actor David Patrick Kelly for his infamous "oh la la" death cry in the movie Commando. However, 6 years earlier, he played the main villain, Luther, in The Warriors, a rival gang member who tries to frame the Warriors for the death of Cyrus, thus leading every gang in the city to try to kill them. The true sinister menace of the Luther character is depicted in the movie's climax, when he clinks together glass bottles that he has put on his fingers while chanting for the Warriors to come out to play. Music, it's oddly very haunting. However, Kelly originally wanted to be doing the creepy death chant while holding 2 dead pigeons, which admittedly would have been very disturbing. But director Hill felt that the clinking of the glass bottles would be much more effective. To be fair, it's the clinking of the glass bottles that stands out in my mind whenever I think of the Warriors. Number 9, original narration. Considering the Warriors is inspired by the Greek tale of Anabasis, director Walter Hill originally wanted the Warriors to start off with a narration by none other than Orson Welles, explaining certain ancient Greek philosophies. However, the idea was rejected by the higher-ups, who felt that it just wouldn't have worked, plus there was the fee that no doubt would have been required to pay Orson Welles. But hey, never mind, at least that very year Welles got to appear in the Muppet movie, so I guess there's always that. The notion of beginning the Warriors with an Orson Welles narration sets the imagination racing, one of cinema's greatest voices introducing a ragtag gang in a crumbling metropolis, while linking it to the saga of Greek mercenaries lost in enemy territory. It's an intriguing blend, part gritty street drama, part highbrow literary reference. Yet it also would have firmly established from the outset that the movie was meant to be taken as something of a modern myth, a street-level adaptation of an ancient expedition story. Nevertheless, the financiers and executives likely balked. Welles's involvement would have driven up the budget, and they might have feared that a scholarly introduction would alienate the youth audience that the studio hoped to attract. This tension between commercial viability and artistic flourish is far from unusual in Hollywood. In many ways, the decision to scrap Welles's introduction might have contributed to the film's sense of street immediacy. By plunging the viewer directly into the dark carnival of New York's gang world without lofty exposition, The Warriors anchors itself in the here and now. The Greek link still exists for those who care to dig deeper, but it isn't forced upon those who just want a thrilling, visceral ride. It's fun to imagine what Orson Welles might have said, though. Perhaps the great auteur would have intoned a few lines about Xenophon's Anabasis, about men who find themselves behind hostile lines with nothing but their wits and each other to rely on. It might have been a unique collision of cinematic legacies, bridging Citizen Kane to late 70s exploitation drama. But it remains one of those what-if aspects of the film's production, a ghostly footnote that teases us with the film that could have been while leaving us grateful for the film that was. Number 10, marketing issue. When The Warriors came out, there was a string of street violence and vandalism reported, which got linked back to the theatrical release of the movie. This led Paramount Pictures to stop all TV and radio adverts promoting the film, and theaters were even given the option not to screen the Warriors if they didn't want to. Some theaters that did show it even hired security. It seemed ironic that the 70s would start with a controversial movie about street gang violence, A Clockwork Orange, and would end with a movie also about the topic, in this case the Warriors. The movie was torn apart by critics for its depiction of youth violence. However, it still struck a chord with young people, and despite its not-so-flattering reviews, it has become a cult classic and to this day has a huge fan base. I think the trick is to separate movie violence from real life, to separate fact from fiction. After all, The Warriors is just a movie, but if some people can take positive inspiration from it and reflect upon it in their lives, then I suppose that's not a bad thing. But remember, movies are just movies, and there is a real sense of power about The Warriors. It's like a terrifying experience that puts us, the viewer, in a very hostile situation, and I think that's where it gets its appeal from. Number 11. The future Oscar winner in a small role. One of the film's most memorable arrest scenes involves Ajax, James Remar, and a female police officer. The actress playing that officer was Mercedes Rolle, who was then relatively unknown. Rolle later became a celebrated stage and film performer, even winning an Oscar for The Fisher King, 1991. Her brief appearance in The Warriors provided a surprising glimpse of the talent she would demonstrate in her future career. Number 12. James Remar's improvised Toughness. James Remar brought a raw energy to Ajax, one of the most aggressive members of the Warriors. Much of that edgy persona sprang from Remar's own improvisations. While the script offered a blueprint, Remar enhanced Ajax's streetwise vibe by injecting spontaneous taunts and mannerisms on the fly. Walter Hill encouraged these improvisations, leading to Ajax's memorable on-screen attitude that was equal parts infuriating and captivating. Number 13. Hiring real local gangs for security. Filming took place on actual New York streets at night, which meant the cast and crew were often in rough neighborhoods. Surprisingly, the production hired some real gang members from those areas to serve as unofficial security, hoping to avoid conflicts with local groups. This tactic sometimes backfired. Genuine rivalries among those gangs could flare up, and the film crew found themselves trying to keep the peace both on and off the set. Number 14. Deborah Van Valkenburgh's real injuries. While Fox, Thomas G. Waits, famously had behind-the-scenes troubles, actress Deborah Van Valkenburgh, Mercy, also had her share of real-life mishaps. During late-night shoots, she was cut by glass on the streets of New York and even sprained her wrist while filming a chase sequence. The production team had to be creative about hiding her bandages and wrist brace in subsequent scenes. Despite the pain, she pushed through, giving Mercy's character an added layer of gritty realism. Number 15. Baseball Furies. Inspired by rock icons. Arguably the most visually striking gang in the movie is the Baseball Furies, known for their vivid face paint and baseball uniforms. Their look was heavily influenced by the makeup style of rock band Kiss, who rose to fame around the same era. Director Walter Hill and the costume designers wanted a surreal, almost comic book quality for the Furies, and Kiss's flamboyant stage persona provided the perfect blueprint for this eerie group. That's the content of today's video. If you enjoy the video, give us a like, comment and don't forget to subscribe to the channel to receive more of our new videos. Thanks for watching.